This is the Podcast Express, and we're talking to whoever's listening out there. Welcome to 5 Minutes of Trouble, the only podcast on the internet that previously discussed the John Carpenter film Big Trouble in Little China 5 minutes at a time. I'm Josh Horowitz from the Wing Kong Exchange.
And I'm your co-host, Brett Stillo. And hey, Josh, I know it's been a while since we've done one of these, but what's up with the music?
Yeah.
Our music is different.
It is a little different this time, and there's good reason for it, because this is not your normal episode.
It's not. It's a bonus episode.
It is. This episode, we're not going to talk about the film directly. Instead, we're going to be talking about one of two books that came out just a couple of months ago. We're talking about the official making of Big Trouble in Little China, the coffee table book by Tara Bennett and Paul Terry. And in the next episode, there's actually making a second bonus episode we're planning on. We're going to talk about the second book, which is the official art of Big Trouble in Little China, also by Tara Bennett and Paul Terry.
Also from Boom Studios.
That's correct.
So yeah, we have a bonus. Maybe we'll have a bonus. But now, as I recall, we were eagerly awaiting these books. Weren't they originally supposed to be released in last year, 2016, for the 30th anniversary? And I think it got pushed back.
Yeah, that's right. There was talk about it coming out sometime in October, I believe, of 2016, and it did get delayed until I believe sometime in February or March. That's when they started coming out, and I got my nice shiny copies of these books. But yeah, a lot of lead up for it, mostly in conjunction with the comic book. You mentioned Boom Studios. That's the same place that did the Big Trouble in Little China comic. And so, especially in the art book, they talk quite a bit about that comic book series. But this is exciting. This is really the first major officially sanctioned Big Trouble in Little China making of compilation. I mean, there's stuff in here that, even people who think they know the film probably have never seen before.
Yes. Yeah. And just to add to what you're saying, this book is gorgeous, folks. Again, it was delayed in its release, but it was worth the wait, because all kinds of amazing pictures and sketches and graphics and text. And if you are a fan of this movie, I would say, yes, you have to have this book.
Yeah, you owe it to yourself to pick this one up. It's about 175 pages. You can get this on Amazon, many other different places. We'll be sure to put a link to it on the truck stop and on the website, so you guys can all check it out. It's got everything from the origin of the film, its characters, major locations, never before seen photos, even excerpts of the W.D. Richter screenplay that we've been talking about on this podcast. You can even see some Xeroxes of Richter's handwritten drafts. It's pretty
exactly
neat.
The handwritten screenplay, original screenplay by W.D. Richter. I don't think he handwrote every single script. That would take a while. Yeah, it's also. I should also point out we're going to do the whole book in this episode. We're not going to do it 5 pages at a time.
Now that would be awesome. How many episodes would that be? Let's see, about 40 or so?
Yeah. So okay, well we could
35.
If you really like it. We could just narrate the book too. But then I think Boom Studios might get mad at us. But it's really interesting looking at this book. I think when we did our show 5 minutes at a time, mostly thanks to you, we covered a lot of ground. We had a lot of research. I think that really this book is a testimony to all the research you did over the years on Big Trouble in Little China, because one fun thing about this book for me was one, confirming stuff that we had talked about, and two, just little tiny gaps, things we speculated on that were confirmed.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. It was neat to go through the book and kind of see that, the things that we talked about on the show were confirmed. Little things such as when we had our interview with Leah Chang, the female Wing Kong guard, how she mentioned how the scenes that she was in was all filmed in a downtown LA. It's some sort of a warehouse. And they mentioned that again in there. all these little things that just kind of make you realize that, yeah, this was part of a real movie that was made, and these things did happen. It's very neat.
Yeah. What was, let's head it over to you. What was the most amazing revelation, or the first thing that really struck you as, aha?
Well, I think it actually came not in the making of the book, but it was in the art book. That was the one where they actually revealed where the origin of the Fu Manchu tank top came from. And that was something that I had been looking for years. Originally, I had heard that it was something that they mentioned in the DVD commentary as just being found on the streets of Chinatown, and they purchased a whole bunch. But no, according to this, and we'll talk a little bit more about this when we get to the art of Big Trouble in Little China, but April Ferry, who was the costume designer, she actually confirmed that it was created by her assistant Paul Lopez, who sketched out the design of the Fu Manchu tank, and that's what became the iconic shirt. Yeah.
So we owe a great debt to Mr. Paul Lopez, wherever he is now.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Sadly, he passed away in 2004, according to this.
Okay.
But yeah, his sort of contribution to Big Trouble in Little China lore came from that one. I think that was one of the coolest things that I remember from the books collectively. What about you, Brett? What would you say was?
Oh gosh. Where to start? Well, maybe somewhere in the first 5 pages. I'll start with Lotus. Did you know about the title Lotus?
Oh, no, I didn't.
That was because the first chapter talks about the original screenplay before W.D. Richter, and how it was a Western. We talked about that at some length over our episodes, and you brought up that Jack Burton was originally Wiley Prescott.
That's right.
But in the original screenplay, the original title of the first draft was Lotus.
Yes.
Which was actually Miao Yin's original name. That was the name of the character, Lotus.
Yeah.
And that changed. And then, it talked about the produce, or was Fox involved at that point? The studio was interested in the script, but they thought, Lotus, how can we sell that?
Yeah.
So
they had a different name then. They were I guess brainstorming other titles, and Gary Goldman suggested Chinatown Gun before they came to Big Trouble in Little China. That's another interesting one.
Yeah. That just struck me. Here's this title we talk about all the time. It's on our minds. It's a great movie title. Mm-hmm. It just cracks me up to think somebody that just popped in somebody's head. How about A Little Trouble in Chinatown? No, not quite. That's not it. How about Big Trouble in Little China?
Yeah.
Kind of wish we'd have been there.
It's funny if you really stop to think about it. I mean, the title itself it's not unambiguous in what it's trying to tell you. Sort of like Snakes on a Plane. It kind of has that type of feel to the title. A bit campy, but something like you would find in a title from a movie from 60 or 70 years ago.
Good point.
But it works because you've got the big, you got the little. It kind of describes everything that's going on in a very succinct title.
Yeah, you could. It's definitely a play on words. You could almost say it's almost like a pun, maybe not quite, but it certainly does roll off the tongue, and it looks good on a poster.
Yes, it does.
Yeah, just to clarify, we were you just brought up April Ferry, and I can't remember. Did we talk much about April Ferry?
A little bit.
I feel like we didn't give her due. Which the book definitely does.
Yes. Yes, it definitely does. They have quite a few interviews directly with April Ferry. I think I just sort of found out about her from looking on IMDb when we were doing the podcast, and I saw that she's been in the industry for a long time. She's most recently done stuff on Game of Thrones, and she did the HBO series Rome. But apparently, Big Trouble in Little China was her first sort of costume designer role. And she has a lot of neat things to talk about, just her experiences working on the film, and especially when you get into the art of Big Trouble in Little China, and you get to see some of the costume designs and the decisions that were made. You get to know April Ferry quite a bit more.
Yeah, that's one thing I like about the book. What you just mentioned, getting to know these people, because there were people we referenced throughout the series, notably, John J. Lloyd.
Right.
I think we brought him up in almost every episode, and his awesome production design. But I never thought to look up a picture of Mr. John J. Lloyd. And there's pictures of John J. Lloyd in there. Dean Cundy,
right.
Great director of photography. Richard Edlund. And I just particularly like seeing John J. Lloyd. He was a little different from how I pictured him. He sort of looked like maybe the guy Jack Burton bought the Pork Chop Express from. He sort of looked like a truck driver, an older truck driver himself.
Yeah, there's a black and white photo where you see him. He looks very much like an engineer.
Yeah. Very no-nonsense guy. I think, in his pocket he's got a bunch of pens.
Sure.
Pre cell phone, pre iPad and stuff like that. But yeah, seeing these people, and also, it truly did look like it was a fun movie to work on.
Yeah.
Lots of great candid photos of Kurt Russell, John Carpenter, Kim Cattrall, James Hong. Looked like, it was an intense shoot, but it looked like it was a fun shoot and everyone was enjoying it. And so that was neat.
Yeah. And a lot of the interviews when some of the cast members have their reminiscences, they always seem to have nothing but good things to say about the film and some of their fellow actors and John Carpenter. Yeah. That was nice. It was good to see that they still look fondly back on this film. Yeah.
Now, there's maybe one thing that bothers me, though.
What's that?
One thing I don't know. I discovered, the origin of the thing I hate the most about the movie.
Oh.
The one thing I despise. I think you may know it's those damn moccasins.
Oh. Yeah, I think there was a reference where it was Kurt Russell himself who kind of requested them, and like he knew somebody who had these particular moccasins.
Yeah, I think he said he saw them in Aspen on a ski trip, which I can totally picture. Particularly if maybe he saw them in the 70s. But I really don't hate the moccasins. Well, I do hate the moccasins, but they're perfect on Jack Burton, who I don't hate. And I love, but yeah, I could almost imagine maybe meeting Kurt Russell and saying, "Oh, look, Big Trouble Little China, and all those horrible moccasins. Oh, who thought of those?" Yeah, that was me, dope. So, definitely fun reading that Kurt Russell really embraced the character, and again, stuff we weren't exactly sure. I think at one point did we speculate? They started off very straight, and then the comedy kind of grew out from that. But they knew exactly the movie they wanted to make from the beginning.
Yeah, I think they really caught up on that pretty early throughout, and even just Kurt Russell deciding that this would be him as John Wayne. I mean, that alone kind of sets the tone for the whole film right there.
Yeah. Speaking of John Wayne, folks, we're all movie nerds. You know it. We know it. I know who I'm talking to out there. And I found just a gem of a movie nerd bit of trivia in there. I don't know if you caught this, Josh.
Which one?
And it goes back to talking about the water tanks.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Yeah, lots of as you folks know, this is a very wet movie. We talked about how wet this movie is.
Damp film.
It's a very damp film. And part of the reason it was damp is they used a lot of water tanks. Our characters are diving into and climbing out of various watery graves. And it's funny. I think we were talking with Jim O'Kane about this, but we kind of assumed, it must have been a water tank on the Fox lot. Back in the days of practical effects, not a practical fence, although fences are practical. The studios have gigantic pools, water tanks for whatever, Esther Williams swimming musicals or sea battles.
Right.
Anyway, I'm trying to stretch this out as far as I can.
I remember they mentioned a specific film that it was in. I want to say it was one of those films from like the 40s.
Yeah, it was a Wake of the Red Witch.
Oh, okay.
Which was done at Republic Studios. So they went to the tank wasn't at Fox, it was at Republic. But the Wake of the Red Witch starred John Wayne.
There's your tie-in.
So at one point, 30, 40 years apart, John Wayne and Kurt Russell were swimming around in the same tank. So I'd like to think possibly some DNA.
There you go.
I don't know. Maybe he got into the tank and he came out as the Duke. I got an idea, John. I got an idea. So yeah, I just wasted 5 minutes talking about that one. But yeah, I love that little gem of movie trivia that's, the water tank used in Wake of the Red Witch.
Yeah.
There you go.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, they had a whole bunch of just things that I'd never really known about the film that sort of come to light just from reading through these pages. One of the ones that I liked was when Kurt Russell starts talking about the whole rationale behind why he wears the Fu Manchu tank. And he was discussing, how it was basically subtle comedy. And he was saying that it was Jack's nod to political correctness. He was saying, I'm going to Chinatown, so I'm going to wear my Chinese shirt. And he comments how this was brutally correct in its incorrectness. That was interesting.
That's very interesting. That shows, an actor's process. Kind of creating that little backstory. And, when I read that and, Russell's quoted, I know I did this, maybe you did this internally. I could hear, I imagined Russell talking to, the authors. And then when he sort of goes into Jack mode. Like, I bet you when he said that, he suddenly becomes Jack. Well, I'm going to Chinatown. I know you want to fit in. You want to show some respect. So like, I imagine, just imagining like 1 minute he's Kurt Russell talking about the character and then he is the character, albeit for a split second. So yeah, that was cool. One of my favorite revelations, that's what we should call this, Big Trouble in Little China, revelations.
There we go.
There you go. One of the greatest screen kisses in history, towards the climax of the film. I don't think we have to describe that kiss. We all know it's the kiss, and how, again, we speculated with the Reels and Wheels guys, was that an outtake? Was that in the script? Was that something improvised? And it was all of the above, or 2 out of 3. It was, again, that was Russell telling a story of he's doing that kissing scene in the elevator with Kim Cattrall, and they cut, and Kim Cattrall starts giggling and everyone else starts giggling. And, Russell is thinking, what's going on? Is my fly open? What's funny? And finally they say, hey, Kim's lipstick is smeared on your face. And correct me if I'm wrong, it was Carpenter then who said, hey, let's run with this.
Yeah,
this
it was
funny.
Carpenter, according to the book. Yeah, that was a good choice, too. That's another one of those very iconic scenes in the film.
Yeah. And again, I remember we speculated quite a bit on, the inspiration for that and where that came from, because you had mentioned it wasn't in the script. Mm-hmm. So now we know that has been answered.
Yep. One of the many mysteries finally solved.
Yeah.
Now here's an interesting thing that I caught up on, and I actually had a bit of a personal relation to. So in the section that was talking about the Pork Chop Express, Kurt Russell mentions that he actually gave a little Pork Chop Express replica to all the cast and crew, just sort of thanking them for being on the show. And I actually acquired one of these collectibles through a contact on my website years ago. I have this actual little, it's one of those things where you can put a tiny little a little clock inside, little digital clock, and you just put it on your desk. And actually, let me pull this one out right now. For years, I didn't know exactly where it came from, but then finally this was explained. It says on the side of it, as old Jack Burton always says at a time like this, thanks. And then there's a signature underneath, and I didn't know who it was from, but I can clearly see that it says K and then the thing, and yeah, that was Kurt Russell. And it has a picture of, it's got the Pork Chop Express on one side. It has the older logo of Big Trouble in Little China on the back. And then, there's a little clock thing that goes in the front. I'll have to take a picture of this for people to see. But a neat collectible, and I was able to get it. So that was cool learning about that from the book.
So again, just so I get this straight, you had this neat little thing, and you go, but you didn't know its exact origin or the signature until you read the book.
Right. Yeah.
Wow.
Cool.
Did your brain explode a little bit?
I thought that was super neat. Yeah.
I can relate a little bit. I definitely know that feeling of, it's just this silly little thing, and then realizing it's not a silly little thing. It's something much bigger. So, is that, or just that, that's where that came from.
Yeah.
And you now have Kurt Russell's autograph on an artifact that came from the production of Big Trouble in Little China.
Yeah. It's pretty neat.
I am in awe.
One, yeah. That one, and then I also have an actual crew jacket from the film, which was like a baseball type jacket, nylon, but it had in the front that same Big Trouble in Little China logo, sort of like the older one that shows, I believe, lightning on the front. But yeah, those are my two tie-ins to the film. Even though I was only 10 years old when it came out, I have a little bit of a piece of history that I can tangibly touch. It's kind of neat.
Very, very cool. I'm trying to remember what that old logo looked like. Is it featured in the Art of Big Trouble in Little China book?
I don't think it is. I think you might see a glimpse of it if you look at one of the trailers for Big Trouble in Little China, but it's not the regular logo that you see on the Drew Struzan poster or anything like that. I guess it was just something that they used during the making of.
Okay. Because I don't know if we'd covered that before, and I couldn't remember if that was featured in either of the books. But yeah, I'll have a little homework to do. Yeah. Another one for me was a name I don't think we had. We talked about what she did a lot, but the name Linda Thompson. Linda Thompson. From what I gathered from the book, she was.
Was she the script supervisor?
No, she wasn't the script supervisor. She was a production designer under Richard Edlund at, and I just blanked on the name of his studio.
Oh,
the
Boss,
effects
right?
studio. Boss, yes. All I could think of was Boom, for obvious reasons. But
Yeah.
Boss, Boom, Boss. But apparently Linda Thompson was specifically in charge of all those great lightning effects.
So we were wondering who was actually doing all that lightning animation, and now we know.
Yes, that was all thanks to Linda Thompson. It does mention at Lightning's demise. Ooh, spoiler alert. His final farewell lightning bolt, and it spells out the Chinese character that says Carpenter.
Yes.
But yeah, that was Linda Thompson, and I think she also worked on Ghostbusters. We talked quite a bit about the look of that effect, and you saw a lot of lightning and similar effects in other movies. She also worked on Tron, and when you think about the color of that lightning and the color you see a lot in Tron, you go, oh yeah, it's all about that great glowing aquamarine.
And Tron, a great movie. Now that's one that requires a movies by minute treatment.
Is there one? I bet you there's.
I don't know. Some people are doing Disney stuff. I think they may be just doing the animations, the animation movies.
Yeah.
But I would definitely listen to a Tron movies by minute one. That was one of my favorite films growing up. Yeah.
Definitely. I'm a big Tron fan too. Get to work, folks. Tron Minute.
Let me see. So I took a bunch of notes just on some of the various chapters, kind of picking and choosing a few interesting things here. We were trying to see if we could get actor Dennis Dunn on 5 Minutes of Trouble. Unsuccessfully, he played Wang Chi. But he did put in his interview stuff for this book, and so I was able to find some interesting things from his experience. I learned reading this that he had a choice, apparently, between taking the role of Wang in Big Trouble in Little China or having a lead in a TV movie called Blood and Orchids. And then he ultimately decided on Big Trouble because he was a fan of Buckaroo Banzai, which was directed by W.D. Richter, who did the
saw
screenwriting.
that.
Yeah.
And we've talked about these two movies are sort of, I think, distant cousins. Or kissing cousins, or however you want to describe them. But yeah, I thought that was a nice touch, that he was a Buckaroo Banzai fan. And speaking of Dennis Dunn, again, things you kind of wonder about, like Kurt Russell's moccasins, Wang's, military flight suit.
Yes.
That he wears for the big battle at the end. That was Dennis Dunn's.
That's right.
He just had that in his closet, in his wardrobe. He mentions, it was kind of a thing at the time. And I
because
think
of Top
back,
Gun. That's why.
Top Gun. Yeah. And, fashion-wise, there was a quasi-military look. When you think about the early 80s, parachute pants and all the zippers, those were sort of, I think, inspired by flight suits. But anyway, Dennis Dunn in his flight suit, and I wonder if he still has it.
Yeah. Yeah, he mentioned in the book that one of the reasons for going with that was a nod to the fact that Wang was Asian, but he was born in America. And there was a very sort of American type style that was all the rage at that time. Though at the same time, he still put in that little plum blossom on the jumpsuit, which is the national flower of China.
I've never noticed that.
Yeah, I didn't either.
The things you learn.
Yeah, that's what all the things in this book. Pretty cool.
Yeah. And it's like when he puts it on, it's like he's going to war. And here's to the Army and the Navy.
Yeah. And the battles they have won.
So again, folks, this book is kind of like Thanksgiving dinner. For those of you who are into Thanksgiving dinner, when you have all the gravy, you grab a biscuit and you sop up you don't want to leave a drop of gravy on your plate. And that's my official review of this book. You don't want to leave, you want to sop up every drop of gravy on the plate.
Well, here's a turkey leg of sorts. When they talking about Egg Shen, who was played by Victor Wong. Again, Dennis Dunn is interviewed extensively in here, and while they couldn't interview Victor Wong, unfortunately, who passed away in 2001, apparently he was really good friends with Victor Wong, Dennis Dunn was, and so much so that he actually named his daughter Victoria after Victor Wong. So that was interesting, too.
Nice. I missed that little particular tidbit. That's great, though.
Yeah.
I enjoyed Dennis Dunn talking about Victor Wong and saying how he was an original San Francisco beatnik. And I'm sure that you brought up that Victor Wong was from San Francisco, but the fact that Victor Wong in the 50s was hanging out with the likes of Jack Kerouac.
Yes, I think that they were saying that Jack Kerouac actually wrote a character, and it was based on Victor Wong.
Yeah,
one of his books. Yeah,
and added little twist that North Beach, which in San Francisco, which is kind of considered the hangout of the beatniks in the 50s, is right next to Chinatown. I can only imagine Victor taking Jack and maybe Allen Ginsberg and Neil Cassidy, just like, hey, I know a great place where we can eat. And hey, Victor knows where all the good Chinese restaurants are. So, I mean, in a way, he possibly was Egg Shen back then. Wow. It's like, come on over here. This is great, you guys. So,
yeah, we kind of learned that some of the actors kind of had similar type of, I guess, personalities or something even beyond just what they were in the film. For instance, Charlie Chi, we talked about how he was all into, what was it, like acupuncture or something?
Yeah.
He had a, I'm trying to remember, was it a Buddhist temple that he had helped found in Los Angeles, something like that?
Gosh, I can't remember now.
In addition to being on Falcon Crest.
Yeah. Well, it was a Buddhist temple dedicated to Falcon Crest and the enlightenment of watching Falcon Crest and achieving a sense of TV serial nirvana. That's not true. I made that up.
Well, let me see some other things that they were talking about. They talked a lot with actor Jeff Imada, who did some of the stunts along with James Liu, and he played Needles, one of the three Lords of Death. And he noted that he was one of the only Japanese among a cast of mostly Chinese actors. That was kind of interesting, too.
This is something we did talk about. I mean, you brought up that the Lords of Death are featured a little bit more in the script.
Right.
And, it talks at length about something you brought up, the demise of the Lords of Death at the end of and I can't remember, did they actually film that?
Yeah, they did.
Or okay.
Yeah, you can actually see it on the extras on the DVD and the Blu-ray. Okay.
So, they go into that, and it was just funny. I'd forgotten that Jeff Imada was Needles. And another shout out to April Ferry, because in the script, the Lords of Death are just, they sort of have a generic uniform.
Right.
It mentions them wearing ski vests. I'm like, down 70s era ski vests? It's so it was April Ferry who went to town and gave him this great crazy punk look.
Yeah.
And they all had this specific looks.
Yeah, it wouldn't be the same without those Inuit goggles.
Oh God, yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And talking a little bit more about Jeff Amata, because he's the one who is primarily interviewed for anything that has to do with stunt work. They start talking about the alley fight. I liked one of the things that he mentions about how during the fight, he personally either died or got beaten up about 10 to 12 times playing different people. So different actors would actually switch from wearing turbans or no turbans, or short hair, long hair, have a mustache or a patch.
Really makes you want to go back and rewatch the alley fight, frame by frame, and pick out those little tiny things. Find out, if that's the case, how many times did James Liu get killed, or Jim Lau for that matter?
Yeah.
Some of the other stunt superstars in that movie. I think when we did that episode with Dennis Rule, I think I had never noticed that it's James Liu who gets thrown through the window, and then he comes bouncing right out in the next scene.
Right.
So the things you learn about when you examine something minute by minute and frame by frame.
Oh yeah. Yeah, no, definitely.
And here's another one I loved, because there was a great deal of speculation about that one, and that's the $3,000 wig that Peter Kwan's wearing.
Yes, that's true. We were wondering if that was his real hair, and I kind of thought it was, but no, not so. He was actually wearing a wig in the style of traditional Chinese cinema, and it was a $3,000 wig by Ziggy's.
Pretty awesome. And as I recall, when he's quoted in this, he seems pretty happy that I had a $3,000 wig. In a sense, he's wearing a used car.
Yeah, probably worth more than that gremlin that we see later in the film. Yeah. And then, actually talking about the storms, I was interested to hear about what they did for the straw hats. And sure enough, it's confirmed in the book that it was based on, or the whole look of the three storms was based on Shogun Assassin and the assassins in the Baby Cart movies. And I think this is something that our previous guests, Kai and Davin, had noted, that it came straight from Baby Cart. Yeah.
It was nice to get confirmation in that case. And, Carpenter saying in the beginning of the book that, he was a big fan of specifically Master of the Flying Guillotine. Again, it's where we knew these movies, and we could kind of tell the influence, but it's just nice to have that confirmation. And, maybe it's a sense of like, hey, John Carpenter, you like that movie too? I do too. We have something in common. We like movies. Right. But seeing, the direct reference to some of the martial arts movies we were talking about, like Zoo Warriors from the Magic Mountain.
Right.
Is another example.
Yeah. Yeah, in fact, I think John Carpenter at the beginning, there's a foreword. During John Carpenter's foreword, he actually confirms that Fox truly wanted Raiders of the Lost Ark with an Asian theme when they were trying to get this movie made. And I think that because it wasn't quite that type of movie, that marketing just didn't know how to handle it.
And yet, I mean, it's a comedy, but it is an action film. I think just recently we had the privilege of being on the Indiana Jones Minute.
Yeah. So
we got to talk with Pete and Tom and Jerry about comparing and contrasting those two films. And I think it's mostly a comedy, but I think there are some great action scenes in Big Trouble in Little China. And
definitely.
Shame on you, Fox. Shame on you. You had a hit and you just didn't know what to do with it. Shame on you.
Well, it became a hit. It just didn't happen during their theatrical run, right?
Yeah. That's the wild thing about movies. We initially look at them purely from a box office standpoint, and its success or failure is like, okay, it was a flop, quote unquote, because it didn't do well at the box office. But here we are 30 years later raving about these two coffee table books. Movies are almost these strange organic life forms that take on their own life and personality. And, that's something else towards the end of the book. It's interesting hearing these folks talk about, afterwards and, seeing, this movie not do so well at the box office, that disappointment, I'm sure, but then it took on a life of its own. It became a Frankenstein monster. It lives.
Yeah, no, that it does. Let me see some of the other stuff here. This was interesting. In the section that was talking about Gracie Law, Kim Cattrall was saying that the hardest part of the role was actually having to wear those white contact lenses, which happened to be by Dr. Morton Greenspoon, if you'll remember, since they were very painful and they would cause her to tear up. So that was her hazard pay, was having to wear the white contacts. I guess in addition to the green contacts that she had to wear throughout the whole film, but the white ones especially, during that freaky scene when she gets possessed.
Yeah, that gave me a pause to think because, when you're doing a film shoot, something on screen that maybe lasts only 30 seconds, that could be a week or 2 weeks. So it wasn't just Kim Cattrall putting on those contact lenses and going through that painful process, but the fact that she had to do that every day for a week or two. I mean, think about that, folks. Going through this uncomfortable process and then realizing, and I got to do it again tomorrow. And the day after that.
But I mean, compare that to what they talk about in the Chinese Wild Man section, where they were mentioning that the stunt person who was wearing that Yeren suit had to basically be on his toes, and it was this big, huge, uncomfortable mess. I mean, imagine having to wear that for every day for like several weeks.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Day after day. And, in that case, the long amount of time between takes that, you have to be sort of on your toes for the scene. And then it's, gravity takes over and you're stuck with this. So making movies.
Yeah. It'll take a couple of hours to get out of the suit. So they want to take it out. Oof.
Completely. And I'm imagining, a vented fan to get air in there.
Yeah, probably.
And forget about lunch. Soup through a straw.
Through a straw, exactly. Sure. Yeah.
And while we're on that subject, some of the prosthetics, awesome makeup.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, we get to see makeup wizard Steve Johnson at work and some great behind the scenes photos. And we see he had something in common with Kurt Russell during that shoot. Steve Johnson is sporting a mighty 80s mullet.
Yes, the mullet.
It made me wonder, did they possibly have the same, go to the same hair person? Did John Carpenter, working in pre-production with Steve Johnson, say, I got an idea for Kurt's character?
Well, even John Carpenter had the long hair back then. Tell me, Brett, did you have a mullet back in the 80s?
I did.
Nice.
I did. But the thing to remember about mullets, folks, there are different kinds of mullets. There are the total hair capes. They're the ones with it's like a crew cut in front. My mullet was, I'll try to find a picture of my mullet era. It was maybe only a few months. It was kind of more of a Rick Ocasek Cars. It was a subtle mullet. It wasn't the mighty, tidal wave of hair, the tsunami that Kurt Russell has. I mean, that thing's a work of art. I think the two greatest mullets in movies are Patrick Swayze in Roadhouse.
Yes.
And Kurt Russell in Big Trouble in Little China. I think both gentlemen take that hairstyle and wear it well.
Well, I still have pictures from probably 1990 when I was a kid, and I I had long hair too. A lot of people did back then. If anything, it looked like Bryan Adams' hair, I was told back then.
Oh, that's a good one. See, like I would put forth that Bryan Adams had one of these, like, we'll call it mullet lights. Yeah, I think it's the degree of mulletude, and maybe on the degree of mulletude. So I remember Bryan Adams' hair, and I would put that on like as a mullet, like a 4 or a 5. It was dialed back.
What's Jack Burton on the scale then?
I think he's attained mullet perfection.
Nice.
In terms of mullet intensity, I'd put it right in the middle. It's a 5. Mm-hmm. It's not over the top, but it's clearly a mullet. Mm-hmm. So I'd put it at a 5, but I'd say he has attained mullet perfection. It seriously, and there are a lot of great candid photos of, say, John Carpenter and Kurt Russell talking and laughing on the set. So it's interesting to see Kurt Russell's in his costume. He has his hairstyle, but he's not in character as Jack Burton. It's a different, you see a different kind of look in his eyes and a different demeanor.
Right.
And, with that, the hair works, Mm-hmm. It's a very bold fashion statement.
Yeah.
But with Kurt Russell's strong jawline and his profile, and he doesn't look bad. Mm-hmm. And he's kind of got that it's that 50s pompadour thing in the front. But the last thing I'll say is on the 10 scale, there's former NFL linebacker Brian Bosworth. That might be a 10 on the mullet intensity scale. So perhaps, I don't know. I don't want to frighten any of our loyal fans off. But maybe we'll post a picture of Brian Bosworth. Yeah, I think it would be Bryan Adams, Kurt Russell, Brian Bosworth. You decide the level of mullet intensity.
Talking a little bit more about the makeup that was done. They go in detail about all the stuff that James Hong had to go through for his his many Lopan incarnations, both the 10-foot tall roadblock, his sorcerer makeup, and then the basket case on wheels, the old man Lopan. Apparently it took 4 hours to apply Lopan's sorcerer makeup, and it took 6 hours and 3 makeup artists to do his old Lopan makeup.
Wow.
Yeah. That's a long time.
Yeah. I with what I've read about, massive latex, prosthesis in movies, I was kind of familiar with the, 6 to 12 hour kind of jobs. Little surprised though to hear that his Lopan makeup took 3.
The sorcerer one. Yeah.
Yeah. That's right. He's Lopan in every scene, isn't he? But the iconic look of, the evil wizard, mm-hmm. Lopan, just stuff you don't think about. I would have thought, okay, some heavy eyeshadow and some coloring here and there, maybe 1 hour, but 3 hours in the makeup chair for that. I mean, it's an impressive look, mm-hmm. But just a reminder, like, movie making ain't easy.
Yeah. And one of the things that they show, which we were kind of speculating about, in the section where they talk about Susie Pai Miao Yin, there is a behind-the-scene photo and description of where she's in her levitation scene, and you get to mm-hmm. see Lopan on his wheeled dolly. So that scene where you see him gliding across, sure enough, there he is on a dolly, being wheeled across.
Got to admit, I missed that. I remember looking at that part of the book, and I didn't quite catch the dolly. But yeah, there you go. But at this point, there's nobody's going to buy the book because we'll just talked about it. We've found all the Easter eggs. But
well, hopefully this will be a taste that will get people to be interested in seeing all of this stuff for themselves.
Yeah, actually, because everything we've mentioned is kind of just scratching the surface. It is it's absolutely a treasure box of tidbits and movie trivia, and I'll leave this one as an enticing one. Hello, Dolly. That's all I'm going to say is Hello, Dolly. There's a connection between Big Trouble in Little China and Hello, Dolly, and I'll leave that one for you guys.
I forgot which one that was. I'll have to look that one up.
Okay, yeah, it's You know what? It's just funny because it was something we talked. I'll just say it.
Oh,
You know,
okay.
I don't, because we want you to buy the book. Well, then again, if I do say it, you won't buy it. No, but we talked quite a bit about what was obviously a backlot in Hollywood that was done up by John J. Lloyd and Company as Chinatown. It's just, again, as a movie nerd, you get excited when you find out specifically that was the Fox lot, and that was built specifically in 1969 for the big budget musical Hello Dolly with Barbra Streisand.
Okay.
And I don't know. I just, when you have a direct name, I get excited. It's just like earlier Wake of the Red Witch. Probably a lot of movies use that water tank, but when you have this kind of direct connection and you associate it. So, yeah, Barbra Streisand and Kurt Russell walked down the same streets in very different movies.
Incredible.
Indeed.
Yes. Oh, here's something, little nugget. So I didn't know this before, but the actor who played Eddie Lee, who was Donald Lee, he apparently was prepared to try out for both Eddie and Wang Chi's parts during casting. But then he first did Eddie, and Carpenter really liked him as that, so he never even got to try out for Wang. They just said, "Yep, that's your part," and he became Eddie.
So funny, from time to time you get those. You hear about those. Well, I auditioned for this guy originally, but I ended up being this guy. So, yeah, I'm trying to wrap my head around Donald Lee as Wang, and I just can't go there.
At one point he actually comments that when he found out that Dennis Dunn got that role, he said, "Oh yeah, that's actually a perfect role for him. He totally sees him as that type of a part." But it would have been interesting if it had been the other way around. Would it have been a little more comedic, perhaps?
It's interesting because Donald Lee is looks like he's a fairly tall actor.
He's a pretty big guy, yeah.
Yeah, and it's funny. I think one of the things that makes the partnership between Jack and Wang work is their size. There's the big guy and the little guy, but the little guy is he's really the hero, and the big guy's kind of a he's a big Great Dane who's kind of clumsy. So, it's funny. I mean, I'm sure Donald Lee would have been very good as Wang, but, there's that size factor that Dennis Dunn and Kurt Russell are so diametrically perfect, that dynamic of the two guys. And it's like that classic kind of comedy team of, Laurel and Hardy. There's a big guy and a little guy, et cetera, et cetera. So, but hey, I'll just throw out a shout out to our friends at the Indiana Jones Minute. Tom Selleck, huh?
Yeah. Right. Let me see some other interesting little tidbits here. So they have a whole section where they start talking about the sewer monster, which we only see for a couple of frames. That's that bug monster that ends up eating one of the Chang Sing as they're going through the tunnels underneath Chinatown. So as we mentioned on our show, the monster was created by Screaming Mad George, who was a bit of a creature shop legend.
Right.
And it was based on a design of a vomit creature that he did for Poltergeist 2. And they even got the same creature operator from that film, who was a gentleman named Noble Craig, to operate the sewer monster. And he was able to do this because Noble had actually lost his legs and his arm as a soldier in Vietnam. And so he was able to fit inside the creature, and it was designed around him. And so he was the one who operated the sewer monster.
Incredible. I believe when we were doing our wrap-up, we saw his name in the credits.
Yeah.
And we just it's a cool name. So is Screaming Mad George, although that's not his real name. That was fun. I've read about Screaming Mad George for quite a while.
Yeah.
But then you find out his real name, which is Bruce Wayne. I wasn't expecting that. But you get some background on Screaming Mad George. So that was cool.
Yeah. I think we were saying on the show incorrectly that Noble Craig and the sewer monster was supposed to be the Chinese wild man, but no, apparently that's not the case. He literally was that bug monster, and the person who played the Chinese wild man, the Yeren, uncredited. In fact, even in the book, they never mention exactly who it is, and they don't show any pictures of him. So I wonder if they just didn't have the information, or he didn't get permission or something. Very strange.
Well, that's interesting. Somebody probably remembers who was in that suit, but
Yeah.
I'm always intrigued. When you do research on a movie, and no one remembers, who was in the suit or who was driving the tank or whatever the scene was. It's just uncredited extra,
Yeah.
and it's kind of lost to time. They had a great opportunity that they blew, that they should have just perpetuated the myth, and that really was a Chinese wild man.
I think we were speculating on one of the past episodes that it could have been Nick Castle who was in the suit.
Oh, yeah.
They're like Michael Myers or something. But from what I was reading in the book, I mean, it sounded like, from what they were talking about, the guy who was in the suit was not happy at all with the role and all the stuff that he had to go through. So I don't know, maybe it was a conscious decision that he didn't want to mention because he didn't have like good stuff to say.
Yeah, or maybe he just he complained his way out of the credits. Something like that. They just, Chinese wild in the credits, Chinese wild man ?
We don't see enough of those in credits these days, do we?
No, they got to bring that back. Gotta love stuff like that. Going back to the sewer monster for just a minute, I can't remember. I haven't had time to go back to our episodes. Did one of us find? There's no mention of this in the book, but is the sewer monster still with us? And did we find a picture of the sewer monster in its current state? It's possibly in Screaming Mad George's garage, or
I don't know. I'm trying to recall if doing all that research, if there was ever something that mentioned that one.
Yeah.
That'd be a cool thing to have on your shelf, I'll tell you.
Completely. Or, again, in your garage, you mount it to an RC truck and you just drive it around your neighborhood. Yeah.
Oh, we mentioned before, the Indiana Jones Minute that we were privileged enough to be on. There is a tie-in, sort of, to, I guess, Temple of Doom and this film, in the fact that some of the primary actors got hurt. Unsurprising in something that's so action-filled. But I know that Harrison Ford hurt his back, and they keep mentioning a lot of sort of scenes that were changed because of that. From reading this, they were talking about the final great arcade fight between Dennis Dunn and Peter Kwong, who played Rain. Apparently, Dennis Dunn messed up his rotary cuff when he was doing this type of sequence, and Peter Kwong snapped his hamstring during the fight. And he describes in sort of horrendous detail of just what happened during that thing.
That must have been particularly traumatic for Peter Kwong, since he's also a dancer.
Yeah.
It's hammies that's a nasty injury, but especially if you're a mobile, active person, that's just, double injury. So in one of the Big Trouble events that you went to, did you see Peter Kwong perform?
Yes.
So he did recover.
Yes, he definitely recovered. Yeah, he did that whole thing with the spinning sword trick, and from what I was reading in this book, when he was auditioning for the part of Rain, he did that same spinning sword trick, and that's part of what helped him get the role. So he knew that even prior to Big Trouble in Little China.
Got him the part.
Yeah. So I'm almost through my notes here. I had something else that was interesting about the video game fight between Egg and Lo Pan. You'll see some really neat behind-the-scene photos of former guest of the show James Liu and Jim Lau, who were choreographing the video game fighters section. And you get to even see their makeup.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were supposed to be more visible in their roles. This is when, the fight goes on, and then you see these two ancient warriors kind of fighting. They're kind of backlit in this kind of glowy type view, but they had detailed makeup on that they were planning on using. That was kind of cool.
Fantastic in preparing for a shot. There's this, as you said, this incredible makeup. And once again, I'm trying to remember if James Liu talked about wearing the makeup or not.
I think he may have. Yeah.
Yeah, it rings a bell, but then it doesn't get shown in the movie. It's there, but only you know about it. But just one of those little ironies. Yeah. It's a great little sequence. And I'm trying to remember. It was a direct inspiration for several video games, as I recall.
Yeah, well, certainly the costume design for Lightning ended up being used in Mortal Kombat.
Oh yeah, total. Yeah, Mortal Kombat.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so anyway, that's one of the joys of the book. You see this incredible makeup on these two stuntmen actors that there's no way you can tell it's there in the movie. It's a very memorable little scene in the movie, but it's you just peel things back and it's a reveal.
Yeah, no, the things they do that we never get to see.
Exactly.
And then the last thing I have here, they have a chapter talking about the soundtrack, which I was eagerly awaiting to see what they would say about Alan Howarth. They actually don't mention Alan. They mention, John Carpenter doing the score and some of the post-production stuff. But one of the things that I thought was interesting is that they talk about some of the temp music that they were using for the film.
Aha!
Specifically, the temp track for the Pork Chop Express theme was the ZZ Top song I Just Got Paid Today, which you heard as part of our intro. So that could have been it, yes.
That's where I've heard that song before.
Yes.
That was the plant. You see, remember the beginning of the episode?
Yeah.
Now we've come full circle.
It all ties together.
It all ties together. The circle is complete.
Yes. Anyway, that's basically it as far as my notes. Did you have anything else that you wanted to mention about the book?
No, I think we've covered it. I hope we've tantalized you folks a little bit. And you want to get this book. We aren't getting a penny from this. This is just us enthusiastically talking about a book that we each purchased with our own hard-earned money.
That's true.
But it's again, if you're a fan of this movie and if you love behind-the-scenes stuff, this is a book for you because it's really, really well put together and laid out. And again, we talked about this movie pretty in-depthly, 5 minutes at a time.
Yes.
For 20 episodes, 20 weeks. That's almost 6 months. Mm-hmm. You'd think we'd be pretty sick of that movie by this time. Yet, opening this book up, I'm ready to watch the movie again.
Yeah. So again, this is the official making of Big Trouble in Little China by Tara Bennett and Paul Terry, published by Boom Studios. Be sure to take a look for it where all fine books are sold.
Indeed. And there is a second book. Should we talk about, should we keep this whole bonus episode thing going?
I think we need to. We owe it to the fans to talk about the second book, but I think we're going to have a separate episode for that one.
Let's do that. And if you tune into the next bonus episode, we won't just be talking about the book. We will be talking to the book.
Oh, yes. We will we'll reveal what that is pretty soon. But yeah, I think that pretty much wraps up this episode. For all of you guys, be sure to visit us at www.5minutesoftrouble. You can also see us on Facebook, and we have the discussion group, the 5 Minutes of Trouble Truck Stop. So please check that out. We're also on Twitter at 5 Minutes Trouble. And yeah, any last words, Brett?
Well, I think that covers it. Let's, it's been a few months, but let's kickstart the Podcast Express and maybe get some of the carbon out of the exhaust and take it for a spin.
Absolutely. All right. Well, for Brett Stillo, I'm Josh Horowitz on the Podcast Express signing off. Thank you for listening to 5 Minutes of Trouble.
See ya.